Part 1, Chapter 4 of the Story of the Barbary Corsairs by Stanley Lane-Poole. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by James K. White. Chapter 4, The Taking of Algiers, 1516 to 1518. The new Sultan of Jijil was now called to a much more serious enterprise than heading his truculent Highlanders against a neighboring tribe, though it must be admitted that he was always in his element when fisticuffs were in request. An appeal had come from Algiers. The Moors there had endured for 7 years the embargo of the Spaniards. They had seen their fragatas rotting before their eyes, and never dared to mend them. They had viewed many a rich prize sail by, and never so much as ventured a mile out to sea to look her over, for there were keen eyes and straight shots in the Peñon which commanded the bay, and King Ferdinand the Catholic held a firm hand over the tribute which his banished subjects had to pay him for his condescension in ruining them. Their occupation was gone. They had not dragged a prize ashore for years. They must rebel, or starve. At this juncture Ferdinand opportunely died, 1516, and the Algerine Moors seized their chance. They stopped the tribute and called in the aid of Salim, the neighboring Arab sheikh, whose clansmen would make the city safe on the land side. But what are they to do with the 200 petulant and vexatious Spaniards in the fort, who incessantly pepper the town with their cannon and make the houses too hot to hold them, especially when they are hungry? Little would the gallant Arab cavalry, with their fine Libyan mares and horses, rich coats of mail, tough targets, well-tempered sabres, and long supple lances, avail them against the Spanish volleys. And who so proper to redress this grievance as the invincible Barbarossa, who was master of a naval force, and wanted not artillery? Had he not been twice to reinstate the unfortunate King of Bougia, and lost a limb in his service? Without the least deliberation, Prince Salim dispatched a solemn embassy to Jijil, entreating Barbarossa, in whom he and his people reposed their entire confidence, to hasten to their assistance. No message whatever could have been more welcome to the ambitious Barbarossa than one of this nature. His new acquired realm brought him in but a very scanty revenue, nor was he absolute. He had been wretchedly baffled at Bougia, but hoped for better success at Algiers, which likewise is a place of much greater consequence, and much more convenient for his purpose, which, as has been said, was to erect a great monarchy of his own in Barbary. With some 6,000 men and 16 galleots, Urūj set forth by sea and land to the rescue of Algiers. First he surprised Shershel, a strong position 15 leagues to the west of Algiers, which had been occupied by Moors from Granada, and was now commanded by a bold Turkish corsair, Kara Hassan, who, emulating his old comrade's success with the people of Jijil, had induced the Shershel rovers to accept him as their leader. Urūj had no liking for 2 kings of Brentford, and took off Black Hassan's head as a friendly precaution, before exposing himself to the perils of another contest with the Spaniards. Soon he was at Algiers, hospitably lodged and entertained, he and all his men, Turks and Jijils alike, by Sheikh Salim and the people of the town. There, at the distance of a crossbow shot, stood the fortress he had come to reduce, and thither he sent a message, offering a safe conduct to the garrison if they would surrender. The Spanish captain made reply that neither threats nor proffered courtesies availed aught with men of his kidney, and told him to remember Bougia. Upon which Urūj, more to please his unsuspicious hosts than with much prospect of success, battered the Peñon for 20 days with his light field pieces, without making any sensible breach in the defences. Meanwhile the Arabs and Moors who had called him to their aid were becoming aware of their mistake. Instead of getting rid of their old enemy the Spaniard, they had imported a second, worse than the first, and Urūj soon showed them who was to be master. He and his Turks treated the ancient Moorish families, who had welcomed them within their gates, with an insolence that was hard to be borne by descendants of the Abencerrages and other noble houses of Granada. Salim, the Arab sheik, was the first to feel the despot's power. He was murdered in his bath, it was said by the Corsair himself. In their alarm, the Algerines secretly made common cause with the soldiers of the Peñon, and a general rising was planned. But one day, at Friday prayers, Barbarossa let the crowded congregation know that their designs were not unsuspected. Shutting the gates, the Turks bound their entertainers with the turbans off their heads, and the immediate decapitation of the ringleaders at the mosque door quelled the spirit of revolt. Nor was a great armada sent by Cardinal Ximenes and commanded by Don Diego de Vera more successful than the Algerine rebellion. 7,000 Spaniards were utterly routed by the Turks and Arabs, and to complete the discomfiture of the Christians, a violent tempest drove their ships ashore, insomuch that this mighty expedition was all but annihilate. An adventurer who, with a motley following of untrained bandits and nomads, could overthrow a Spanish army, was a phenomenon which the Christian states now began to eye with considerable anxiety. From the possessor of a strong place or two on the coast, he had become nothing less than the Sultan of Middle Barbary, Maghrib el Asat. When the Prince of Tinnis raised the whole countryside against him, and a mighty host was rolling down upon Algiers, Urūj marched out with 1,000 Turks and 500 Moors, and never a cannon amongst them, and smote the enemy hip and thigh, and pursued them into their own city. The Prince of Tinnis took to the mountains, and Urūj Barbarossa reigned in his stead, 1517. Then Tlemcen fell into his possession, and save that the Spaniards held Oran and 2 or 3 fortresses, such as the Peñon de Alger and Bougia, his dominions coincided with modern Algeria, and marched with the kingdoms of Tunis and Fez. He was in a position to form alliances with Fez and Morocco. His galleots were punctilious, moreover, in returning the call of Don Diego de Vera, and many an expectant merchant in Genoa or Naples or Venice strained his eyes in vain for the argosy that, thanks to the Corsairs' vigilance, would never again sail proudly into the harbour. When all this came to the ears of the new King of Spain, afterwards the Emperor Charles V, he yielded to the prayer of the Marquis de Comares, governor of Oran, and dispatched 10,000 veterans to make an end of the Corsairs once and forever. Urūj Barbarossa was then stationed at Tlemcen with only 1,500 men, and when the hosts of the enemy drew near, he made a bolt by night for Algiers, taking his Turks and his treasure with him. The news soon reached the enemy's scouts, and the Marquis gave hot pursuit. A river with steep banks lay in the fugitives' path. Could they pass it? They would have the chances in their favour. Urūj scattered his jewels and gold behind him, vainly hoping to delay the greedy Spaniards. But Comares trampled over everything, and came up with the Turkish rear when but half their force had crossed the river. Their leader was already safe on the other side, but the cries of his rear guard brought him back. The Corsair was not the man to desert his followers, and without an instant's hesitation he recrossed the fatal stream and threw himself into the fray. Hardly a Turk or a Moor escaped from that bloody field. Facing round, they fought till they dropped, and among them the vigorous figure of Barbarossa was ever to be seen, laying about him with his one arm like a lion to the last. Urūj Barbarossa, according to the testimony of those who remember him, was, when he died, about 44 years of age. He was not very tall of stature, but extremely well set and robust, his hair and beard perfectly red, his eyes quick, sparkling, and lively, his nose aquiline or Roman, and his complexion between brown and fair. He was a man excessively bold, resolute, daring, magnanimous, enterprising, profusely liberal, and in no wise bloodthirsty, except in the heat of battle, nor rigorously cruel, but when disobeyed. He was highly beloved, feared, and respected by his soldiers and domestics. and when dead was by them all in general most bitterly regretted and lamented. He left neither son nor daughter. He resided in Barbary 14 years, during which the harms he did to the Christians are inexpressible. End of Part 1, Chapter 4. Recording by James K. White, Chula Vista.